Welcome to the Atomic Masculinity Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Chris Hogan. I have my two sons with me here today, Zeke Hogan and Deuce Hogan. And the topic today is the ideal man. What does the ideal man look like? And so the reason I thought about talking about this is I believe right now we have kind of a misconception of what the ideal man is. And there is an old statement that talks about society and how society kind of shapes men. And Zeke, what is that kind of that circular argument, not necessarily argument, but it's a statement of how men are created based on the times you mentioned the other day?
It says, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times.
Got it. And so I think we have been in good times for 50, 60 years in the United States of America, particularly relative to the rest of the world. We've been a really good time, but good times create weak men. Not necessarily bad men, just weak men. So they can be good guys, good men, but not good at being men. You know who this guy is? This is the guy who the girl comes back to and says, "You're really a great guy, but I feel like more like we're friends." Because he's a good guy, good man. He's just not good at being a man. And so this guy sits back and says, why don't I get respect? And why does this girl go for the bad guy type? Well, in light of having a bunch of weak men, by the way, there's been an attack on boys for 40, 50 years now, and it's worked. We have a bunch of emasculated, soft men. And so what you end up with now because of social media is you have these guys who come on and they are actually good at being a man. What are they? Well, they're masculine, competent, ambitious, action-oriented, and they've got all these teenage and low 20-year-old followers. And these guys are out of control, but they're manly, they're masculine, but they're also conceited jerks that are not considerate. In other words, they're not good men, but they're good at being men. See, there's two different things. There's good men, and then there's being good at being a man. What I'm saying is, my proposal today is the ideal man mixes these two things. You're good at being a man, but you're also a good man. That is the ideal man. But my observation is we have too many weak, emasculated men in the society. So that's what I see from my generation. So the reason I wanted you guys on here is I wanted to get your perspective. Do you see that with your generation? And maybe also, what do you think of my analysis?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'll go. I definitely see it in our generation, and I think it has a lot to do with the narrative that boys and girls are not very different. That's pushed in seemingly every arena, like everything that can be done to, like, whether it's in school or whether it's in the workforce. Like, people try to actively not acknowledge the fact that boys and girls are inherently born different. So the way that we're treated or the way that boundaries are set up, try to level the playing field. But what that actually does is screw the playing field up depending on the arena that you're in.
It mainly messes the boys up.
Yeah. And so I've definitely noticed it. And I definitely think that young men are born with that primal sort of nature that likes and is naturally attracted to ambition and goals and power and masculinity. But I think that the way that the world defines manhood today is different than manhood was defined years ago. And so I think a lot of the time, like back in the day, to be a gentleman, right, or to be a man, that meant that you opened doors for women. That was like staple, right? Like if you didn't, you were a jerk. You were the outcast. Now it's like part of modern day manhood, quote unquote, is like not worrying about anybody but yourself.
Yeah.
Just being. So I definitely.
And women are equal to men, so they can take care of themselves, an egalitarian type deal.
Right. So, yeah, to answer first of all, I think your analysis is spot on. I think that we're in a generation that tries to undermine and not acknowledge the real differences between men and women. And secondly, I think that young men that are, Zeke and I's age have a real tendency to be drawn to men that are masculine, but it's very hard to find the combination of somebody that is good at being a man or being masculine while also being a good man.
Right.
I think also it's really hard. There's no in between anymore. There's no in between. So there's people who are obsessed with They think just the moral thing to do in all scenarios is to just let everything happen to them. They think, the very passive.
Make it fair.
Make it fair. Like, well, you can have your, people will have conversations and they don't want to get in, anyone's way or mess up anyone's opinions or ruffle any feathers. They
Don't disagree too much.
Right, right.
Which, by the way, that is a feminine trait.
Yeah, it disagree
to be agreeable.
Yeah.
Right.
And
by the way, obviously, that doesn't mean all women are agreeable or that all men are disagreeable.
Right.
But, on the scale, generally speaking, men are much more disagreeable than women.
Right.
But young men are being trained to be agreeable.
Also, you can't in a college university say what you just said without people freaking out.
Oh, right.
Like the fact of the matter is it's a lot more likely for two men to get in a disagreement, or the man is going to be the disagreeable party
right.
in the majority of situations.
Sure.
But if I was to say that in a college campus, they deem me sexist and everything else.
And that's my point.
Which is why I did bad in a lot of classes. Because
was that the reason? No, but that's my point is they're making it they're shaping academia, especially is shaping it to where you have to use their language to describe the reality or create a new reality. And the problem is that language feminizes men.
Yeah. And we've ascribed kind of a moral value to being so meek you just get trampled over. Like if they've mistaken weakness for kindness. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They kind of hide behind this to feel good about themselves. And then, like I was saying, there's no in between. The other side of that is people who they train to just completely rebel against everything.
So the opposite side.
Right.
That's the masculine man you see on social media with a bunch of followers, and they are
right. And this is the person who won't fall in line ever under any circumstances and think every institution should be completely overturned. I'm going to live life on my terms, my way.
Right.
And so they don't follow any moral guidelines. And it's just one or the other.
And the way that, like in our program, obviously you taught us this, but the way you always defined it to us was the challenge of being a gentleman warrior is what you called it. In some instances, the situation called for a gentleman. And so that is the last one on the lifeboat. That's the ultimate servant, right? That's the one that's washing other people's feet. And then a different scenario calls for the warrior. And then it's kill or be killed. And you have a biblical duty to protect and provide and preside. And so I think that is the perfect embodiment of it. And earlier before this, we were in the kitchen and we were talking about King David, actually. And it was interesting. What Zeke mentioned is like he was the ultimate warrior and known for that, but was also known to weep.
Right.
Like the gentleman warrior.
The gentleman warrior. And for those of you who may not know, so I coached football for about 25 years. And as the head coach, I was trying to I just used football to develop men, to be honest with you. It's just a great platform to build men. And so he's talking about, I always challenge the football players to be gentleman warrior. In other words, the teacher should think you are the most respectful student in the classroom. And wow, that kid has good parents, always stays after class. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. But you should be unrecognizable to this teacher when the ball is snapped. You ought to be the ultimate warrior, absolutely mangling people. Okay to help them up after the play's over, but when the ball is snapped, you need to be an uncaged animal again.
Or when somebody gets bullied and they can't defend themselves.
Yes.
Like there's a time for you to be uncaged and
a warrior.
You want to see what's masculine?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a time to show it. But what a lot of people are doing are going into a situation where there's a room full of women and everybody's meek and mild and they're trying to attack and dominate, and disrespect is not masculinity as it's often portrayed to be now.
Right. That's exactly right. So I think we would need a redefinition of what the ideal man is, but it is definitely not somebody who operates like a female.
Okay. So what would you say? What are the, top 2 or 3 things? How would you define manhood or maybe biblical masculinity?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're kind of putting me on the spot.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. No, I don't mind. I don't know. Biblical masculinity. First of all, I think the ideal man has a great sense of authority. In other words, I'm not God. There is a God and I'm not him. Mm. Let's start right there. Right. And so I don't think that's an issue. And so understanding authority. So, and here's the deal. I answer to a higher authority than me. So can I go out and just dominate weaker people than me, physically, mentally, emotionally? Yeah, I could. I could do that. Take advantage of them, use people. I could do that, but I have to answer to a higher authority. So if you're not afraid of some authority, that's the problem, is men will go wild without authority. That is why a boy without a dad is something like, I can't remember the exact statistic, but it is like between 10 and 20 times more likely to end up in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you get about 14, most guys can overpower their mom or just ignore what's she going to do and whip you with what, right? She's not going to physically do anything. So a boy that doesn't have guardrails is dangerous. The most dangerous people in our society are males between 16 and 26. That's who the most dangerous people are. You know why? They have the least regard for authority. You can buffalo a fifth grader, but an 18-year-old that doesn't have a dad that makes him do right, or a male figure like a dad who says, you're going to do this, you're going to say yes, ma'am, to her. That guy will do what he wants to do. And he's not married, and he doesn't have kid responsibility. So he has no responsibility for anybody and no guardrails. That person is dangerous. So I start with understanding, well, think about what the Bible says. The beginning of wisdom is what?
The fear of the Lord.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of, in other words, there is a God and I'm not him. I think you start there and you're 90% of the way. But we live in a secular society. So that's where I would start.
I think too, it's important that we acknowledge that the understanding and acknowledgement of there is a God that is above me will be taken in today's world and said that you need to submit, which I think that submission by the world's standards is different than submission to the authority of Jesus.
Yes, because the number one thing sold in today's society in America is autonomy. I can do whatever I want. My right. For instance, I'll give you an example. They have recently passed laws in the last 5 years in California where it's okay to steal. You walk in a place and steal, as long as you steal under $1,000 worth. Under $1,000 worth of merchandise, which means the autonomy of that person to get what I need trumps the laws of the land, the authority. See what I'm saying? Personal autonomy is a deal that is thrown out there all the time. I have my rights. And I think it hurts guys. When you make a guy and say, hey, look, buddy, you have to protect her and you're responsible for these kids. I think that's when a man becomes his best. When he's responsible for something and he has to protect something.
Yeah, that's where people find meaning.
Right.
Is in service and in responsibility and in getting things done. Because like you said, the thing that's common between the average, what it was 18 to 26 or 16 to 28, that age that makes them so dangerous is that they are accountable and responsible to nothing outside of their own appetite.
Right.
So they spend that saying, okay, well, what do I want to do to fulfill me? I bet the statistics are way different if they are married.
No doubt.
Or if they have kids, because being in a place where you have nothing to satisfy but your immediate desire is so different than, hey, I have people to provide for. I have a duty to like, people will take pride in having to do a job, even if it's a small job that's not very publicized and not making much money. It doesn't matter. It's what I'm supposed to be doing. They take responsibility and pride in doing it.
Right.
It's that same theme of autonomy. I'm in charge of myself completely. The society is encouraging complete moral autonomy.
Right.
So you do what you believe or feel is right.
Right. In other words,
no one else gets to tell you what that is.
So the statement, love has no labels.
Right.
Right. That is autonomy over structure.
Right. And in the same way, people try and we're seeing this in our generation a lot, is people aren't willing to assume responsibility because they want to be fully ready for it, to be in control of all responsibility. But you're never ready for more responsibility. Things need to be thrust upon you and you become more equipped and capable as you deal with life. And so what you have are a bunch of people who are avoiding just life, the next steps in life, getting married, having kids.
Right. Because people get married so late now.
Right. And they're doing that because they want to be ready. You're like,
you're never going to be ready.
Right.
Yeah.
I will also say that I think there's something to that speaks to the fullness of life that previous generations lived before us.
Yeah.
an older generation can tell you, your grandparents can tell you a story and they'll say, oh, well, it was 1974. It was a Thursday. It was about 55 degrees and your grandmother was wearing a blue dress.
Right.
They can tell you exactly where they were and what the date and temperature was because they were so much more hands-on in life. And I think hard work plays a big, big role in that. One time, Dad, I asked you, how do I make time slow down? Because I was in a chapter of life where I felt like things are going a million miles an hour. I was in college and I would come home and Zeke would be a year older. And you know what I'm saying? I just felt like, golly, I'm seeing everything go. And you said, if you want to make time slow down, you do hard things because there's something about hard work that makes you be where your feet are.
That's right.
And part of what we're saying is like, not only is we are encouraged to keep as much responsibility away from us as possible.
That's your generation.
That's
right.
I'm saying our generation. Also, let's see how much we can get like AI to do it. How much work can we outsource? And I think it not only hurts your manhood because your responsibility, but it also takes away from the fullness of life.
Yeah, I agree. Because men are fulfilled by action. There's no amount of AI or anything else that's going to change that. A man is fulfilled by action, and the world rewards.
Yeah, so Zeke brought up something very interesting about the difference between men and women and testosterone and estrogen. Tell them what that was, Zeke.
So I was doing research about different hormones and transmitters, because I was trying to figure out why working out feels good. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. And trying to understand like the good feeling of like burning muscles and stuff like that when you work out. And the key thing that I figured out was testosterone makes effort feel good. And estrogen makes feeling and emotions feel good, which are two wildly different things.
Very different.
Yeah.
So despite the physical pain, the thing that comes from coming out of a deep max squat, as bad as it hurts,
Yeah,
the testosterone makes that feel like boom, like that feels good. I like what that was.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes for a woman, sometimes they need to process emotions, whether it's good or bad, but it just feels good to go through it. Let's talk it out. Let's cry it out.
Right. And, it's interesting. When you're talking like this, we live in such a soft age that if you don't make a disclaimer and say something like this, obviously, action and accomplishment also make women feel good. And also, there is a degree to which feeling emotion makes a guy feel good. You're not just making a blanket statement of this is the way it is for men, this is the way it is for women, but you have to say that. Because if you don't say that, then people immediately, they're going to send me a bunch of emails and I feel good when I finish something too. It's going to be, you just have to defend that. And that right there shows the softness of the age. Everybody's looking to get offended all the time.
Yeah, and they have tried to restructure and take control of the English language.
Correct.
So you have to constantly clarify and redefine the obvious.
Right.
Like, yes, of course it feels good as a man to process emotion sometimes. And you know what I'm saying? And of course there's tons of women that do stuff and feel accomplished but they've tried to steal the English language.
That's right.
So that every word or not word is its landmine.
And by the way, that's how every leftist revolution in the world begins, is a change of language. They steal the vocabulary first. So
what was that thing that propagandists said? The World War II Nazi propagandists?
Yeah. I don't have that data right in front of me.
Oh. There was a guy who said he who controls the language
controls the people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He who controls the...
And he was a propagandist for Hitler, right?
Yeah. 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 I can't remember his name. I don't know. I can't remember it off the top of my head. So again, just don't get away from our topic. The ideal man. So as we're talking to guys, so you're between the ages of say 16 and 35, and we're talking to that guy. How do you build yourself into the ideal man? Well, that depends on where you're lacking, right? Because if you lean a little bit to I'm very agreeable, I'm a good guy, I'm a nice guy, I'm morally, I feel like, want everything to be good with everybody, but I don't get the respect that I want, and I can't attract women. You're probably a good man who's not good at being a man.
So elaborate on that, Dad, for somebody who says, is being agreeable such a bad thing? Because I will say this, I think that what this generation and the education system
we're fixing to get to something good. Keep coming.
The education system and just today's world has, not only is agreeableness not a bad thing. It's a good trait. That's a trait that people desire. And then also it's like, it has almost made you not want to think for yourself.
Right, because we can just get along.
Let's just all get along.
And by the way, big governments that want to take over don't want you thinking too much.
So tell me, what would you say to the guy that says, "Oh, is being agreeable," or "I'm really not opinionated. I'm kind of go with the flow by nature." Like,
okay, so let's do it. Let's take a real life situation to answer that.
Okay.
So let's take this in a real life situation. Instead of just making the statement, let me show you how this plays out in real life. Here's a young man who wants to date a girl, and we're going to take the agreeable approach. He calls her up. Hey, how's it going? I was hoping that maybe we could go out sometime. Blah, blah, blah. And he's really a soft sell because he don't want to overpower her, and he wants to make sure she feels empowered in this relationship. And they're talking, he talks it. So they finally get around wasting a bunch of time on the, yes, we'll go on a date. And he says, well, what day works good for you? Just an open it because he wants to be agreeable. Right. And then she suggests a few times and he goes, oh yeah, no problem. I can make that work. And he says, okay, what kind of food do you like? And then I'm okay with anything. Well, no, go ahead and tell me. We'll just get whatever you want. And then she's like, well, I'm good with this. This is okay. Well, when I pick you up, we'll talk about it on the way there. And eventually, what time works for you on the date? And it's you see what I'm saying? He has to get, what is the word I'm looking for? Consensus. He has to get buy-in. He has to make sure we're all fair and equitable. Okay, let me just tell you something about that. Women are not attracted to that. So how do you say that's being agreeable in the wrong place? It is much more attractive for the woman for you to call her up and say, hey, I'd like to ask you for a date Friday night. And you just leave it at that and make her answer. And then she's, sure, Friday. Okay, great. I'll pick you up at 7:30 and wear a long dress. Or, hey, we're going casual, boots and jeans. I'll see you at 7:30 Friday. Bam, hang up the phone. Which one of those do you think a woman is more attracted to?
Well, I can tell you what 100%, like I can tell you what women are more attracted to. And I can also tell you that everything you see on social media and the majority of women with a mic in their face in today's world that's putting out media says, well, we don't want you to just da-da-da-da-da. Okay, but I can tell you this. At first, the guy that's agreeable doesn't necessarily come across as unattractive. But that's the same guy that 4 dates later, he's seen as a friend.
Correct.
Because you act like her
exactly
female peers.
That's exactly
You play
right.
the exact same role.
Because that's what they would do. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go?
Yes,
exactly.
They play the exact same role. So
Correct.
Let me ask you 37 questions. Let me not be definitive and decisive on anything. And then let's make sure I don't step on toes. That's actually listen, if you are scared of saying, I'll pick you up at this time on this date and this is what you should wear. And there's women that are saying, well, why don't I get to choose? That could be, there could be your answer.
Right. Exactly. And here's the deal. When the non-agreeable guy or the guy who's more action-oriented, a little bit more masculine, a little more take charge, a little more direct, a little more decisive, when that guy shows up, here's the deal. It's okay to be good at being a man and still be a good man. Go up and help her down the stairs, walk out, open the door for her, pay for the meal, treat her like a queen. So you're a good man, but you're good at being a man.
Yeah, and you're not soft.
Exactly. I don't think women are attracted to soft guys. But that's my point. You said, what's the difference between agreeable? That's what I'm talking about right there.
I remember I was talking with my fiance. I get married in just under 2 weeks now.
Wow. Coming up quick.
Yeah. But
better get your best man speech ready.
But Emma was talking about, she always watches how people treat waiters and waitresses. And that was the one thing she was watching on our first date because, I was telling her, hey, I'll pick you up at this time. I remember our first date, I told her, I'll pick you up Saturday at 8:00, bring your Bible. And we're going to a diner, so dress casual. That was, and, but she was like, one of the only things that she was focused on the date was watching how I treat the people around us and the person that was serving us. And did I leave a tip? Did I take care of the people around me?
Right. That's a great tip by Miss Emma King, your future wife. If you want to know about a guy or even a guy wanting to know about a girl on a date, watch how they treat the waiter or waitress. That's a huge tip. I could give you about 5 more like that, but that's a good one because that tells you a lot about that person.
So Zeke, I was going to ask you about this too, because this is in the same thought process. We're talking about the agreeable man that might get a few dates in and come across as nicer, but then it doesn't work out, versus the direct man who, hey, might step on a few toes, but it generally is going to attract more women, right? One of the things you told me, Zeke, is that when men are masculine, it makes the woman more feminine. And when women are feminine, it makes the man more masculine.
No question.
Because when you try to muddy the waters, it ends up making the man a little bit more feminine. I don't want to step on toes. And the woman ends up saying, well, this is what I want. Here's my opinion. I'm going to make a decision because you won't. You're the one who first told me that. So can you just like kind of touch on that?
Well, I think that we talked about earlier when you have a wife and kids to take care of and a job you need to show up to, that you kind of, you become the person who fulfills those roles because you feel the pressure, right? In a similar way, when you're in a relationship and a woman is, let's say, she surrenders some of her safety and competence to you. She's like, she doesn't want to worry about what's going on. She wants to love the experience in you, right? And so she might surrender some of that up to this really masculine man and become even more like the stereotype, like damsel in distress, like, oh, take care of me. As a man, you see this, and that naturally you see that need, and you have there's a strong desire to fill it. So you puff your chest up and you check the surroundings, and you know what I mean? You grab her tight, and
Sure.
it just, you assume the role, because it's like, there's never a gap. Somebody's going to be on high alert. Somebody's going to call the waiter back and say, hey, this isn't made right. I need you to go take this back and do, somebody's going to do that. And so it's either going to be you or her, or neither. And everybody's going to be uncomfortable or dissatisfied or unsafe, or just
right.
There can't be a vacuum.
Yeah.
So I think that, and then in the same way, when you are more masculine, a woman feels the freedom to maybe I don't know what the right word is. Assume a more feminine just life position. And I think that men naturally desire that more. And I think women naturally desire that more.
Yeah. And so I think the ideal man, the whole topic of the ideal man, can be summed up in men and women are different, right? And men do not need to trade in their masculinity card so they can get the approval of a woman because she's looking for a good guy. 100%. You can be a good man who's good at being a man and possess those masculine traits of decisiveness and action oriented and protector and provider, etc. Right? So, but I think that most women would say, I definitely want a guy who's good at being a man, but he's a good man.
Can I give an example of this too?
Shoot.
Sometimes the job you have sometimes this can get this can muddy the waters. But I have a really good friend who his mom is very, very successful. She makes millions of dollars a year. And her husband, my buddy's dad, basically said, hey, I can help my wife out. And whether it's helping her out at home or helping her out actually with her job, and we can be very efficient and we can run this thing together. And he is very masculine. He is an awesome father. He is an awesome husband. There's a clear way that things run in his home, and he follows what you would call like biblical marriage. It is awesome. Now, the woman is the primary provider.
Sure.
But he's a good man that's good at being a man, and it doesn't fall into a traditional, well, the wife stays home and does this, and the man has to go make the money. But he didn't say, okay, I'm going to adopt a bunch of feminine traits because I'm taking the kids to school.
Right.
You can still be manly.
Sure.
Like your manhood is not defined by your occupation or the role that you're
That's
playing.
right. Totally.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, totally get that. Yeah, I totally get that. And obviously that's a unique situation, or, it's not a problem for that to be the situation.
Right.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. I agree. Your position doesn't necessarily, your position should never define your identity.
Well, for the first year of my marriage, I'll be playing college football.
And your wife will be the primary breadwinner.
Right.
Yep.
But it's not at the expense of my masculinity.
Right. Yep. True. It's a good example. Good example. All right. What questions? Anything else we need to discuss here?
What kind of advice would y'all give to someone who leans more on the agreeable, meek side because they see maybe the moral side of it? They're like, well, I mean, I don't frustrate people. I'm a kind guy. And, you know, girls might not be attracted to me. I don't feel like that's my fault. I feel like I'm doing things that are right. What is your advice to that person to be more masculine? Like, what are the first steps someone takes to assume a more masculine just state of person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a big believer in that you are the combination of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. I mean, if you change the crowd you're with and their language is a certain way, you'll find yourself talking like them, right? So I would say get a mentor. Find somebody who's masculine and they're clearly good at being a man and get them to mentor you. Get into their flow of life. And so that's number 1. Number 2, you have to define these things. So in other words, I will tell you this, the essence of masculinity is action. So it's about doing something. So I think that you outline, I'm going to do A and B, and I'm going to follow this guy, and we're going to talk about these things. So now you're getting an example, you're getting the discussion, the conversation. By the way, that's a great way to think of parenting. Parenting is only one long conversation. So you're getting the conversation, you've got the model in front of you, and you also have your action items you're doing. But to move into more masculinity, you have to be more decisive and you have to do more. So those are the things that I would advise. Get a plan, take action, and get a model.
Yeah, I would say community is the first thing that came to mind, and I'll be quick with this. But I remember going to play football in the Big Ten, and my first year was COVID. It was a little bit weird, but after my second season, I was really feeling like I was in the program, and I had an idea of what was quote unquote normal. And this is funny, but I remember coming back in the playoffs to a high school football practice, and I was so on edge when like a backup JV player was like walking on the field, or when I didn't find the snap count to be loud enough. And I remember like talking to Dad about it, and he was like, Deuce, you have lived in this savage primal, and nobody walks on the field or you get kicked. You know what I'm saying? And so I remember just like my environment making me sort of like, all right, every day is kill or be killed.
That's right.
So the first thing that came to my mind is community, because what you experience every day is what you become.
It starts to shape you.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of the stereotypical like passive man that we're referring to, he probably has a pretty passive lifestyle or works in an environment that doesn't demand decision-making, opinions to be voiced and stood upon. You know what I'm saying? So if your environment doesn't demand that, the first thing that came to mind for me is community that does.
Yeah. That's a good point. And that kind of goes back to good times create weak men.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, we live in a place that's so good or
affluent,
soft. You get to live life like water.
Yeah.
Path of least resistance. Right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There was not a lot of 40-year-old pajama boys living in their mom's basement when you rewind the clock to harder times and coming out of the Great Depression in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in this country. Manhood was defined and it was clear. Matter of fact, one of the big differences between men and women growing a boy into a man is if you just leave a woman alone, a little girl alone, and just keep her from getting killed, she automatically matures into a woman without you having to force her there. That girls just become women. It's like a gift from God to females. Girls just become women. That's not the case with men, because girls are grown, boys are built. Boys have to be jolted. They have to have resistance. They have to have accomplishment. They have to have failure. They have to be shaken. Yeah. They have to. Building a boy is a process.
And for the fathers listening to this, something that Dad always stood by is that it's way easier and better and more efficient to build boys than it is to repair men.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't remember where I got that quote, but
yeah, you did get it from somebody. I don't know if it was a book or what it was, but it is better to build a boy than it is to repair a man. And it's like you said, boys require hard things that teach them this is who I am. This is what masculinity is.
They need resistance. They need definitions. By the way, you say, well, maybe that's just your opinion. Well, do a little research. All over the entire globe, whether it's Arab tribes in Africa, in this country, in America, all over in England, and there's a country over there I'm thinking of, Scotland. The Scotland Highlanders had initiation rites. It doesn't matter if it's tribes all over the planet for thousands of years. There have been initiation processes that move boys into men. Those things don't exist for girls. Why not? Because every society realized these guys have to be kicked in the butt and turned into men. And when our society got soft, 40-year-old pajama boys started living in their mom's basement because they were allowed to.
I also comment on this. This might be for a different podcast. We might have to pull up some numbers, but what is the average lifespan of a country?
250 years if you're talking about democracies.
And where are we at right now?
250.
We're right about there.
That's right.
Which means that a huge reason that is the average lifespan of a country is that there are good times created
by strong men.
By strong men. And in the good times, manhood is diminished. And then you have weak men that create hard times. You get to the point where basically the human cycle is we own a piece of land or we own our own freedom until somebody comes and beats us up and takes what's ours. And so what you have in America right now is a pivotal point and a young generation of men that have to reestablish masculinity by creating their own resistance, despite the fact that we are in hard times or we're in good times.
Good times.
We have to have young men that create resistance so that we can continue to produce strong men.
Yeah, it's for a long time, and for a lot of America's history, you being considered a man was predicated on you doing something hard that you could be proud of that contributed, right? And so
you were competent.
Yeah, you were competent. And I think that, I guess if we have to redefine masculinity or go about redefining masculinity in today's day and age, because they don't connect it to competence in any way or what you should be proud of, or there's no qualifier there. It's just you're a man and you just exist as a man. But it used to say you're a boy even if you were 33 because you're not contributing. You're a boy. You're under this roof. And
you're taking no responsibility.
Right. And so, and that's just like what you tried to build in your football programs is you put kids through something that was very hard, but also something that they could be very proud of. And you put those things together and it creates that personality or that bent in you to say, hey, meet me here at 8:00. Like you puff your chest out. You're confident. You make decisions.
I've done things
because
I've accomplished.
Right. I do hard things and I do good things. Like you said, we would murder people like an animal on the football field and then help them up, pat them on the butt. You know what I mean? It was never no malice, but it was about, it's just you have to generate and force that personality and character into somebody.
Manhood is earned.
Yeah.
Forged. That's
right.
Why
it used to be. Now it's just you exist as a man.
You're right.
Yeah.
And that's why calling somebody a boy, that's where its negative connotation comes from.
That's where it came from.
That's where it come from. It's like, well, to call a 35-year-old man like, hey, boy, I'm talking to you. That had a negative connotation. It was you have
about as bad a cut down as you could give.
Yeah. And it was the connotation was you don't have anything that you can stamp your name on. You don't contribute. You don't have responsibility.
You don't have competency.
Right. And that's a cut that it almost doesn't feel like it cuts as deep as it used to.
It doesn't.
Because our society doesn't value competence and responsibility the way it did.
Or masculinity in general. But I can tell you right now, women are hardwired, just like men are hardwired. And believe me when I tell you, women are attracted to a guy who's good at being a man. They're attracted. And that's sometimes why women chase bad boys. And that's sometimes why they won't leave. And it's obvious this guy's just he's a jerk. He's a junk. And they just cling to him because he's so good at being a man. He has all these masculine qualities. So the ideal man is both good at being a man, but you're a good man. You got a good moral compass. And I think that's the target. But we have to take the ground back on being good at being a man. It's not offensive to be decisive. It's not offensive to be a good decision maker. It's not offensive to be high competence and try to win at your business or anything else.
Can I say
These
something
are
else?
good things.
Can I say something else?
Sure.
It's not bad to swing and miss.
Right.
Like just a few weeks ago, we were sitting at a table with a young man that said, hey, he said, Coach Hogan, I have an opportunity to take a job.
I forgot about this.
He said, I have an opportunity to take a job and it's right by my house and it's safe. I know I'll be good at it. I have a history in it, but I can only max out making blank number per year. He said, but then I have this other job and it would require me to move, but the ceiling is way up there. And
he wanted to do it.
And he was bent towards that. And Dad said, well, are you married? He said, nope. Do you have kids? Nope. And Dad said, swing for the fences.
Yeah.
That is, like you said, it's not wrong to be decisive. That is another thing that I think has castrated some men by societal standards, just saying, well, men are like, well, I don't want to fail.
Right.
Which is the most backwards thing. Like, part of manhood is like swing over the fences. Hey, and if I miss or I get knocked out, I went down throwing haymakers.
That's right.
And we're going to bounce back. That's how great things are created.
Right. And it's way worse to wait until you're 35 and then swing and fail, because then you're 35 and maybe you have a wife or a kid, versus you swing and I can swing and miss 20 times. I'm 19.
Right.
Like I'm coming from zero anyway. It's not like it doesn't matter. Well, not coming from zero, obviously. But like,
if you probably got like $10.
Yeah. Right. If I lose all my money, it's like, okay, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on something too. There's a difference. Today, we're told to live a secure life and a safe life. That's nonsense. You want to live a full life, not safe, a full life. And there's going to be swings and misses in there. Who cares? When you're done with your life, you've lived. And that's a good point.
This is another podcast. This is for the next one. Living a full life is not taking unnecessary risk.
Exactly.
I'm doing everything.
Putting it all on red.
Which, by the way,
or hitting an 18.
Right.
That's not living a full life.
Right. Which is way more associated with men taking unnecessary risks.
Right.
Women are like, why would they do that? We don't know. We're born that way.
Coach Hogan told me to live a full life.
That's right.
Hit me.
Well, guys, thanks for doing this. I'm pumped up. We got to do it together, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. And if you like the podcast, forward it, share it, like it, all that stuff. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.